You have been chosen by extraterrestrial beings to be their next experiment. What do you do? Today's film is a horror sci-fi thriller from 2013 titled Dark Skies. Opening with an ominous quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. In a beautiful, picturesque suburb, we meet what seems to be the perfect American family. Couple, Lacey and Daniel Barrett, along with their two sons, Sam, the adventurous and curious younger brother, and Jesse, the teenage older brother who is trying to navigate the world of growing up. They all seem to have a healthy relationship with one another, most notably the two brothers. One evening, the Barretts invite visitors over for a barbecue. While the children play, the parents debate a variety of issues ranging from politics to mutual relationships. Midnight. The dinner has ended. The guests have all gone home and everybody is exhausted, all having fallen asleep. Lacey wakes up and checks in on the kids who are deep in their slumber. She goes downstairs and heads to the kitchen to find that their fridge has been ransacked, the food trailing out to the open back door. She investigates and finds nothing, but this incident is just the beginning of many more to come. The next day we find out that the Barretts are just like any other family, despite the image they exude. We find Lacey conflicted on her virtues on selling a house she knows is unfit to be sold, and Daniel struggling to make ends meet, unemployed in search of a new job. To make matters worse, he finds a notice that states that they're falling short on their mortgage payments. Despite everything, he hides all of this from his wife for the sake of not worrying her. The father, society's perceived pillar of stability for any family, is, in this case, bearing most of the weight and struggling to at that. That evening, we see the effects the previous night has had on Lacey, who now makes sure every door is locked. She heads downstairs after waking up from her sleep, and is startled to find an intricate structure made out of the junk that spans from the floor to the ceiling. She checks the structure out when Sam appears out of nowhere. She asks her son if he knows who built the structure. Sam replies that it was Sandman. He come to him in his dreams. Lacey, extremely startled, asks if Sandman told him to do this, and Sam tells her that he did it himself before coming to his room. This incident, along with the first, prompts them to have their house investigated by the police. The officer that arrives is understandably skeptical about their claims. As a result of this, they have a burglary alarm installed in the house. Later that night, while watching TV, Daniel brings up the notion of cutting back on cable for a few weeks. Lacey knows that this is uncharacteristic of him, and knows something is wrong. She presses him about it, and pretty soon after, Daniel admits that he didn't get the job. The two argue, the brothers on the walkie-talkie overhearing their mumbled voices from their rooms. The psychological torment continues when the alarm goes off at night. Daniel and Lacey scatter around and everything looks normal, so they turn off the alarm. He calls the alarm company to inquire about what happened. They tell him that it must be a technical malfunction because every single sensor in the house was set off. As Daniel informs Lacey of this, Lacey begins to stare in horror at their living room, realizing that every single picture has been removed from its frame. They have the authorities investigate the next day, as well as a technician from the alarm company. The technician concludes that no break-in has occurred, and the police officer, the same one who investigated the other night, brings up the possibility of it being the children doing. Lacey and Daniel consult their children about the matter. Jesse vehemently claims none of this is his doing, since he was asleep at the time. Sam, on the other hand, remains silent. When Lacey asks him if he had the Sandman dream again, Sam tells his mom that he's not allowed to tell anyone. This causes Daniel to freak out and search Sam's room for the photos. The following day at the park, Sam plays with his friends while Daniel chats with his friend from the BBQ. He asks Daniel about Sam seeing a therapist, but Daniel denies it in fear of being judged. Their conversation is cut short when Sam pees his pants and all the other kids start laughing at him. Daniel runs to his aid. He asks Sam what's wrong, trying to help him shake it off.
He remains unresponsive when suddenly he shrieks, seemingly unprovoked.
Back at home, while Lacey cleans up Sam's room, she finds a drawing containing a dark, slender figure holding the hands of what seems to be Sam's stick figure counterpart. Suddenly, a bird slams into the window. Lacey goes to check when a flock of them starts slamming into the house. Later, a cleanup crew cleans up the mess while Kevin Ratner, Jesse's bad influence of a friend, poking and prodding on the dead birds that surround them. Daniel requests from the woman, assessing the area, that they figure this problem out, since they already have enough on their plate, and they don't need this to add to the list. Lacey and Daniel ask Sam about the incident at the playground. Sam replies he remembers walking over to play with the other kids, then he wasn't himself anymore. This, obviously, is a cause for concern for the Barretts, who finally decide to seek professional help. That night, Lacey wakes and hears Sam speaking to someone in his room. She walks in to investigate and finds the slender figure looming over his bed. Terrified, she switches the light on and it's gone, along with Sam. Daniel and Lacey rush out of their house to find Sam standing shirtless in the front yard. He once again is under the control of something as he persists to be unresponsive to Daniel's attempt of snapping him out of it. Suddenly, he does come back to his senses, asking his father why they're outside. Lacey and Daniel gather their thoughts in their bedroom, Daniel questioning how Sam ended up outside without tripping off any alarm. Lacey tells him that she saw someone in Sam's room. Daniel doesn't believe this and brushes it off, saying that they don't need any more problems. Sometime later, we discover that Jesse has been using his mother's realtor code to get into vacant houses. This seems like an innocent way of getting some space for himself, but his true intentions come to light when Kevin arrives with 2 girls and weed. Jesse shares a moment with Shelley, one of the girls, and tries to make an inappropriate pass at her. Shelley gets upset by the move, but after realizing he has never kissed a girl, decides to give him a kiss. The Barretts beef up their security, a camera surveilling every room. The next day, Daniel reviews the footage to find nothing but a short period of strange interference. Lacey is back out again, trying to sell a house to potential buyers. Everything seems to be going smoothly when she suffers a sudden episode that causes her to behave strangely, banging her forehead against the glass. She wakes up in her bed after the episode and uncovers a bruise while checking herself out in the bathroom mirror. Her boss calls, asking her what happened. He gives her some time off to get herself together. After this, she gets a call from the Department of Wildlife, learning that there were no traces of any contractable disease and the birds came from 3 different flocks. She decides to do research and soon finds herself in a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, uncovering evidence that their experience is not unique to them. Meanwhile, Daniel's occupation situation starts lightening up when he finally scores a job. This brings some much-needed relief to Lacey and Daniel, who celebrate with passionate lovemaking while a babysitter looks after their kids. That night, Lacey wakes up and finds herself alone in the bed. She goes out looking for Daniel and finds him outside, staring blankly with his mouth wide open. Suddenly, blood starts running down his nose and he walks back inside, snapping out of it seconds later. As they watch this unfold on the security camera, Lacey decides it's time for her to detail her own abnormal episode, showing Daniel the bruise on her forehead. She also shares her research, which points out the clear similarities which Daniel views as outlandish, refusing to have an expert consult their situation even after knowing that they risk losing one, if not both, of their children. But the incident the next day leaves them with no other choice, as the trip to the local pool reveals Sam's torso is riddled with mysterious bruises. Jesse and Kevin are out in the woods when Kevin starts chasing Jesse with an airsoft gun. Jesse loses him and finds himself in a clearing, where a strange, high-pitched noise enters his brain, causing him to have a seizure. At the hospital, the Barretts are informed by the doctor that with there being no evidence of physical trauma, he believes that the causes of the sudden episodes are caused by emotional trauma. Afterwards, he shows Lacey and Daniel several photographs of complex geometrical patterns branded onto his skin, and tells them that he must notify Child Protective Services since it is required for him to do so. Daniel concludes that this is all Kevin's doing, and he confronts him at his front yard, shoving him to the ground. Kevin's dad emerges out of the house and tackles Daniel to the ground and punches him. Lacey tends to Daniel's bruises. Jesse grows resentful of his parents after the attack, feeling embarrassed for his father's overreacting. Sam is returned back home by the parent at the pool. Fed up with everything, Lacey argues with Daniel, desiring answers. Later that night, Daniel wakes up from a nap in his office and finds the same familiar interference in the surveillance footage in Sam's room. He rushes quickly upstairs and is relieved to find nothing. He then turns Sam over to find that his eyes are missing from his eye sockets. This is confirmed to be a dream when he startles himself awake, but is left with the gruesome image of his son imprinted in his brain. He returns to his monitor and starts to review the footage frame by frame. In doing so, he discovered what he hadn't seen before. Something is hidden in the strange interference. It is the familiar slender figure that's been tormenting them the past couple of days. They meet up with Edwin Pollard the next day at his apartment building. Inside, the Barretts are fascinated with the various research papers and news articles pinned on the boards and walls, a conspiracy theorist's haven. Pollard explains about what he calls the Greys, conducting a survey designed to conclude what their situation may be. Lacey and Daniel pass the test, and Pollard explains that their motivation is unknown, other than the fact that they seem curious about the Earth and they're experimenting on people. These beings control humans through an irremovable implant that most affected people are unaware of, explaining the unrelenting itch behind Daniel's ear, which Pollard shows he has as well. When the beings begin to make themselves evident, that usually means that they are ready to abduct one of them. It's usually always the first person they made contact with from the family, in their case, Sam. Concerned for Sam's safety, Pollard tells them that the only way to keep them away is to make the snatching as difficult as possible for them, to the point that they decide to move on to someone else. Having nowhere else to turn to, they decide to prepare for an imminent abduction. Daniel goes to the local gun shop and buys a shotgun, while Lacey adopts the most fierce and aggressive canine she could find at the dog pound. They board up all windows in the house to keep out the threat. Upset by all the sudden change, Jesse heads off to find comfort in Shelley, who tells him that though his father is a bit weird, he isn't crazy. With Shelley's words of encouragement, Jesse returns back home at dusk ready to help out. That evening, they share an emotional moment with each other, momentarily giving them a sense of normalcy as they share fond memories of one another. But the moment is ruined by an electric disturbance. They stash away the kids upstairs as Daniel stands his ground for defense. The outside of their home is lit up by a bright light, the same light that causes Lacey to get distracted and move away from her post, resulting in her being locked inside her room. The screws start popping out of the boards, Daniel unable to make out his target due to the blinding light. The kid's door bulges inward and bursts open. Daniel emerges and takes the kids. The family regroups with Lacey in the bedroom. Despite being on high alert, it takes a moment for them to realize that the aliens have surrounded them. Daniel fires off a round and suddenly, Sam and Jesse find themselves alone. Sam runs off and Jesse goes after him when his surroundings start morphing into the house they have for sale, where he finds his parents, bloody and hopeless. Jesse continues his search for Sam and eventually finds him balled up in the hallway. However, he snaps out of his hallucination to discover that he was who the aliens wanted and not Sam. The aliens have him surrounded. A bright light takes over the room and Jesse disappears with the aliens. 3 months later, Pollard reads of the abduction on a newspaper and cuts it out. He heads to his wall filled with cutouts of missing children's articles and pins Jess's photo among them. The Barretts now live in an apartment, having moved out of their previous house. Their apartment is filled with moving boxes and is starting to share a resemblance with Pollard's, as several missing child posters cover the walls. Lacey goes through a box of Jess's things in the kids' room, finds several of Jess's drawings, and realizes that Jesse was who the aliens made the first contact with years ago. Turns out, ever since then, the aliens have been pursuing him, shown in the multiple sketches of him in different stages of his life. As Sam is going through his box, they hear static from the walkie-talkies. Lacey and Sam are spooked. He approaches and answers it, and through the static hears unintelligible voices. That sounds like Jesse.